We are live. No, we're not live, lovely Gary. I know we could pretend, couldn't we? But if we had anybody who was trying to watch live and chat with us, they'd be going, so rude, they're ignoring my comments. We're not live today, lovely crafty monkey. If you are watching us, we usually go live on a Friday. It is today, Friday, August the 5th for you, but this was recorded just a couple of days before because we weren't able to go live because of other commitments. We do have commitments apart from learning to sew and making a fool of ourselves. I'm Rachel. This is a lovely Gary down here who you can see, and Gary is our teacher and I am the pupil. If you come in a Crafty Monkey class, you might have 3 hours with the lovely Gary or many other tutors that we have in our stable. Actually, it shouldn't be a stable with monkeys. It should be in the jungle. It should be in the trees. We have lots of tutors hanging out in the trees. That sounds a little bit weird, like they're behind trees. No. So, yes, if you want to check out Crafty Monkeys, go to the website, craftymonkies.com. We always have a cup of tea with us, but because it's the summer, I've been on the water. I've been partaking of the water, Gary. But you still got your builder's tea.
Yeah, still on my builder's tea. So yeah, a nice strong cup of tea. I like to taste my tea. I don't like wishy-washy tea, and I like Indian tea. So yeah, I'm all ready to go. I've got my tea here.
You are ready to go.
Yes.
I have to say, if I have a tea, it's got to be very, very, very weak, like tea bag, in, out, shake it all about. That's it.
No.
Well, we've got our drinks and we always start with a little quote because we like to talk about life just for a couple of minutes, and you might find one day that a quote inspires you or moves you or makes you think, or you might come back in 2 weeks and think about that quote. And so we start with a little quote, but we always put it in the timestamp so you can skip by all this nonsense if you're not interested and get straight to the sewing. Today we are going to be talking about, we did the sewing machine in our last lesson, which is in our tea time tutorial playlist, and today we're going to be actually doing some sewing and doing some seams, and a French seam. Oh la la. Hopefully my fingers won't be going under the machine. Also with some top tips. So the first thing to do is the quote. I always give Gary a little quote and ask him for his opinion. So this is from Eckhart Toyle. Is it Toyle, Toll, Toyle? I never know how to say his name. He's a wonderful man. Look him up. The amazing TED Talk. He's on Instagram, on YouTube. And Eckhart Toyle. And he says, very simple, this one: wherever you are, be there totally.
That's really good. How often we are in company or we are doing something like a class like this, but our mind could be thinking about, oh, I need to get the washing on. I need to do dinner for the kids tonight. I need to make sure that I, paid that bill. So it's what he's saying is like, you should be completely focused on the action or the scenario that you're in at the time, because I think the human mind, it just jumbles about and it flips from things to things, and we have so much coming in on us that we could be running having a nice creative class with any of us at Crafty Monkeys, and our mind's on something else. So I think that's a really good point. It's about trying, and I know it's not hard, it's not easy to just put those things to one side and then just focus on the job at hand or the people that are around you at that moment or the activity you're up to. My yoga teacher, now I do a bit of yoga, she always says when we're doing that shavasana at the end, where we're into relaxation, she says, collect all those thoughts, and she literally does this action, collect all those thoughts and put them to the base of your skull, and then you can always be there when you've woken up, or not when you've gone through relaxation, when you come back out, they'll be there. So that's all you need to do, is collect the thoughts, put them there, they'll be there when you need them.
That's a really good, because if you can visualize things like that, that does make it easier as well. You can put all those thoughts there and then try and clear the brain. Yes, absolutely, that's a really good one. And I think, there is that sort of cheesy phrase, isn't it, which I can't remember all of it, but it's certainly about today is the present. That's why it's called a gift, because you should live in the present. It's a gift, so be in the present. But it is about being in the present. And I'll tell you something, I've been on holidays and I know that I've stood in the sea, and instead of feeling the sea and feeling the heat and feeling the warmth and embracing every minute, I've been thinking about, oh, I'm going home in 4 days. Oh, when I get back, I've got to do the work and blah, blah, blah. Instead of just being in that moment and enjoying it. So always try and just ground yourself and live in the moment and get every single bit of life that you can in that moment and try and push all those thoughts to the back, even if you have to time yourself. Okay, give myself 3 minutes of thinking nothing. And it's amazing how it will just ground you and calm you down. So there you go, Mr. Eckhart
Yes.
Toyle. Have a look at him. I shall spell his name. It is Eckhardt, and then Toyle is spelled Tolle, I think. So I'm not sure it's Tolly, Eckhart Toyle, but anyway, he's a terrific sort of philosopher. Very good. It's very funny as well. Very funny. Right, so lovely, Gary. It's time to do sewing. Now, last week we were threading the machine, which I managed to do. I managed to thread a bobbin, thread the needle without
Yes.
any major injuries or occurrences.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do today?
Okay, Rachel. So what I'm going to get you to do today is I'm going to get you to learn about just going to create some seams with your sewing machine. So we're going to do a 1/4 of an inch seam.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that's the width from the edge. So a 1/4 of an inch. We're then going to we're going to do 3/4 of an inch. Now in centimeters, that's 1/2 centimeter or 1.5 centimeters. So we're just going to do those. We're going to change the stitch length as well. And also then we're going to finish off with doing a French seam. So a French seam is slightly different than an ordinary seam. So there's three things to do there. So what we need to do first of all is you've got to look on your machine to where usually there's like the foot plate, and some machines, most of them have, like on mine, have like almost like little lines to actually tell you where. So where the like where is a 1/4 of an inch, where is 3/4 of an inch, where is it? So where do you line up and how do you do that? Because it's about creating consistency when you sew through. You don't want to go from a 1/4 of an inch and then suddenly veer off and then next minute you're doing 1.5 inches, because if you're creating something and you vary the width of your seams, you'll have a very misshaped garment or an object. Maybe it's an interior, could even be a cushion or curtains, and it just won't fit right, it won't hang right, because you haven't created really nice, straight, even, consistent seams. So the first one we're going to do on the sewing machine, so we threaded up the sewing machine, and as you said, if you want to have a look at when we discussed about doing all that, that was in last week's Live at 5, which is been pre-recorded. Now, I'm just going to take a little bit of calico here. So I'm just going to take some 2 pieces of calico, and it's got a nice straight edge here. And these are the bits that you're going to I'm going to machine a seam down. You're going to do similar. So you might need to cut yourself, or even if you're at home, you might want to cut yourself a little bit of just a couple of pieces of any fabric. It doesn't have to be calico. It could be any piece of woven fabric we're going to do. So we put that to one side. The other thing we're going to do to find where our 1/4 of an inch seam guide will be is that we can have a look on the foot plate where that is, but depending on where the position of the needle is in the machine. So mine is in the middle of the foot here. What you can do, just to check, it might be up, you might not even have lines or indications on there, but you could just use either a ruler or you could use your tape measure, and then you can measure where the needle goes in, where that is, and where a 1/4 of an inch will be. So you could just measure. Now, a little hint and tip, I always have a little bit of masking tape or a little bit of tape that I can put on my foot plate so that it helps me when I'm guiding my fabric through. You don't have to have it on there all the time, and you want a bit of tape that you can take off later, but it just, if you haven't done, or your seams tend to wander and you tend to find it very difficult to keep to a straight seam. So you could just try like this masking tape. You can just put that on and you can just line it up to where a 1/4 of an inch is from where the needle is going to go into the fabric. So that's there. So that's like my guide there. So how have you done, Rachel? Have you managed to create where your needle goes down? So where the needle goes in,
so
not
I'm
from
just
the edge
looking
of the foot.
Yeah, so there's the needle, and so I go to the edge there. So that to me looks like a 1/2 inch. So I'm not sure how I do I guess a 1/4 would be the edge of this metal piece here of the.
So let's have it. So we've got, so it would be, let's just have a look. So actually a 1/4 of an inch will be right up against
Up against the actual
foot. So if you think, if you line it up, so if it's aligned up, the piece of tape will go just before where these are called feed dogs that come up. Those little
say don't
feet
cover
come up
those.
and down. They come up and down and they actually they're the things that grab hold of the fabric as you're sewing and drag it through the machine. So
Yeah.
those there. So that's your 1/4 inch. So you've worked out that your 1/4 inch actually, when your needle's in the middle,
Yeah.
it's actually to the side of your presser foot
Yeah.
here. That would be a
Get
1/4 inch.
that.
That's really good. So that works out quite well for later. So
Yeah.
I'm going to just thread up my machine. I don't know if yours is still threaded from last week
It's
or you
all
need to thread it
threaded.
up.
Yeah,
It's
it's all
all
threaded.
threaded. So remember, we cut with nice sharp scissors. I'm just going to thread my machine. I'm just going to thread it. I'll put my presser foot down. And remember, we had that palaver with trying to thread it with a thread and everything. All you need to do is put your finger behind, and then you've got something, you've got the eye of the needle framed, so that it's so much easier to
It's
pull
really
that
easy.
through like that.
Yeah.
So we've got that. So you should be able to see that there. Okay. Right. So I did say I was going to say about stitch size. So most machines, especially the new sort of more modern ones, as soon as you turn them on, you'll see in the little display at the side. So if I move, I'm just going to move my camera up a little bit so that you can see, because you can see what I'm going to be pointing to. Let me just bring that up slightly. I can always bring it back. So up here on the display, it says 2.5. And I know yours probably says the same. Does it, Rachel, 2.5?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes if we're making, say, for instance, we're doing quilting, or we're maybe doing quilting, we would props or joining quilt pieces together. You could go, it could go smaller than that. It could go to 2, or it could go to 2.5. When you're making garments, I tend to take it up to 3. Now, the why I do that is because I know from experience, especially with fitting and that, quite often, sometimes you have to unpick things. It's so much easier to unpick a slightly larger stitch than a really small stitch. If it's a really small stitch, what tends to happen is like, oh, you're forever trying to get those stitches out. So my little sort of like hint and tip is just take it up a notch, take it up to 3. That's not too big, but it's not too small if we're making it for a garment. If we're doing joining quilt pieces together, we might need to have it at 2.5 or even down to 2. Because we're going to do a seam, which is more appropriate for a garment, I'm going to get you to do a back stitch as well. So on the machine here in my middle there, it's got that sort of loop. It says to go back on itself. So I can press that and it will go backwards. Some machines have like a little bar at the side that you press down to go backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at your machine, and I think yours has probably got the same as mine, because yours,
Yeah.
I can see on yours, you've got exactly the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to lift my presser foot up, and I'm just going to position my fabric, and I'm going to just line it up. So it's all lined up here to the side of my little bit of masking tape there on the side. Now I've come forward. I haven't gone right to the end of the fabric. I've brought the fabric in a little bit. So rather than starting, so if I show you, I'm not going to start right at the tip here. What I've done is I've come in and I've actually probably maybe about sort of 1/2 inch I've come in, and then I've put my foot down. So it's well under the foot there. Now, what you can do is you press the reverse and you go back 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches, and then you can come forward 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches, like so. And that is anchored. That is now anchored on. Let's see how you're doing.
And I just press that button.
So press the button in, and press your, at the same time, press the foot on the floor, what I call the accelerator, and it should go back. Has it gone back 1, 2, 3, 4 times?
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So, and now you can come forward. So now come forward.
And that's just by pressing the foot pedal.
Yes.
We're off, Gary. We're off.
Right. Yeah. Don't go too fast. We're only coasting at the moment. We're not on a rally track.
Okay.
And we're not in mass production making loads of clothes. We're just going.
I'm in Coronation Street. 20 odd years ago, when they used to all sit there making their knickers or whatever it was. You remember when they used to say, "Oh, Betty, come on," in Coronation?
Yeah, whizzing away on industrial sewing machines.
What was he called? The guy who ran it?
Mike Baldwin.
Mike Baldwin. Oh, we remember him. He was a bit of a cad. He was.
He was. He had a bit. Oh, we could go into all sorts of things at Coronation Street, but we will digress too much. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to now machine slowly. Some machines like this one, your one will be the same. You can actually alter the speed. So if you're not very confident, you can actually go to a really slow speed,
Oh, okay.
or you can whack it up.
I
The
didn't
other
know
thing,
that.
you didn't know that that's what they did?
No,
Have you?
it's been on the fastest speed.
Maybe for you, Rachel, maybe just halfway, just halfway. So yeah, you've got exactly the same. You just put it halfway. You don't need it really slow, because it might be, when it's really slow, it's quite frustrating. But if you're doing really intricate work, sometimes it's best to have that on there, because we can all slightly like put our foot down to go forward a bit too fast. So that
Yeah.
just almost like gives you a sort of it just keeps it regulate. It's a regulator, really. So again, but you can still control it with your foot. I tend to use my right foot for making it go forward. So I'm just going to go forward, and I'm just keeping it. I'm letting the machine take it through. I'm not pushing it. I'm not dragging it from behind. I'm just going to let it go through, and I'm just going to come almost to the end. So I've gone through, just guiding it through, and then I've got to the end, and then I'm going to press. I'll wait till you get to the end as well. That looks like it's going okay.
I tell you something, that masking tape is brilliant.
So really good.
They're really good. It really helps you because it gives you at least an inch to,
Yes.
I mean, an inch of fabric to make sure it's in a straight line. You're not looking at a little tiny bit of metal that you can't really see. It's really good. Okay, so I've got to there.
Lovely. Right, got that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to go right to the end?
Right to the end, and then you're going to press that reverse foot and go back twice, two stitches,
Okay.
and then you can
One,
two stitches, one,
two.
two.
Yeah.
That's it. And then you can either, there's a button here that makes the needle come up, or you can use the wheel at the side to make the needle come up. So you want the needle out, so you don't want the needle inside the fabric. Once it's come up, then you can lift up your presser foot and you gently move it away to your left, and then you can then cut it. Then you can cut your, like that.
Okay, lovely.
Okay. Then you can make, what you can do is you can make an assessment of how good the stitch is. So at this point, especially if you're just running off some test stitches, you can think, oh, are my stitches okay? Do I need to increase or decrease a little bit of the tension? As I said last week, most of the time you don't have to change the tension, but sometimes if you've had, you know, maybe you've been doing some like loads of activity on it, or maybe you've changed the thread, but sometimes it can slightly go, you might have a little odd little loop, or you might find that one side you can see the understitch coming through. So you might just want to alter it one way or the other. So if the understitch is coming through, you might want to tighten the top stitch a little, or loosen the top stitch a little bit so that it's a little bit looser, so it's not so tight. But if it's coming through to the other side, you want to like just slightly tighten it. So again, you can play around with the tension only if you do have a problem with it. If it looks like it's okay, then don't play around with the tensions. Rachel, yours looks great, actually.
Yes, pretty. I'm really quite pleased with that.
Now,
Very
have
neat.
you managed to keep consistency? Have you got a nice, is it nice even stitch from the beginning? Have you got a quarter of an inch all the way along?
I'm not sure whether that's just my eyes that are deceiving me, because when I look off camera, it looks pretty good. But when I'm going along like that, it looks like it's getting a bit thicker, but it really isn't when it's, I think that's pretty good myself.
That's not bad. You can always, if you want to check that you've managed to get it right, you can always just put your tape measure just to check that you have got it right on this test piece. So
Yeah. Half
does it look?
and half. And do you know what? That's pretty spot on.
Okay, yeah. So
Pretty
not bad. You've got it equal. So you've done it equal. Okay, right. So that we can put that one to the side. So we've got a quarter of an inch one. Let's try and increase the width of it. So that one, if I just go back to the quarter of an inch, what would we use a quarter of an inch normally for? Well, you could use it for finer fabrics. You tend to use quarter of an inch for when you're making sort of like lingerie and smaller things like that, rather than 1.5 centimeter seam allowance or a 3/4 of an inch seam allowance, because you'd have to cut a lot away. So if you want to you don't have to cut so much away from the seam if you've just got a narrow one, but you wouldn't use it all the time. If you bought a pattern, a commercial pattern, say Simplicity, a Burda pattern, I'm just trying to think what other patterns you can buy for clothes making, style, those sort of Vogue patterns, anything like that. In general, the seam allowance to make the garment is 1.5 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch. So we're going to do that one because that's the most general one that you're going to use. So what you now need to do is you need to work out, so you need to measure again and find, it might be a guide, it might be already written a guide on there, but now you need to find 3/4 of an inch and where that would be.
Right, so there's the yeah, that's a quarter, that's a half, so 3/4 is about, yeah, it's about there.
That's there.
3/4, yeah.
Lovely. And it's great, you know, like you've got, what tape are you using there, Rachel? Because it's not masking tape. You had something else, didn't you?
Yeah, it's just like a little clear tape that you just put onto, what is this, look? So it's here. This is the it's that stuff. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. You wouldn't use it to sort of seal up an envelope or something because it, you know, it could be peeled off really easily. But it's like a sort of, yeah, I don't know. Just got it from WH Smith's, just a stationery.
It's done in WH, but that's fine. So as long as it's just got some sort of tape that you can move on and off, that's fine. Yeah. I mean, if all you've got is sellotape, then use sellotape. But just remember to don't leave it on just take it off when you finish using it, because sellotape can tend to then leave a sticky residue.
It feels a bit like a washi tape, actually, Gary. So
yeah,
washi tape would work.
Yeah, like a washi tape, but it hasn't got a pattern on, so that's fine. Okay. Yeah. So now we're going to do exactly the same. So can you remember? So we're going to take another piece, 2 pieces of calico, and we're going to do, this time we're going to do a 3/4 of an inch seam. So what do we start off with, Rachel?
Hang on, you know you're using 2 pieces. I'm just using 1. Does that matter?
I would sew 2 pieces, so sandwiched together. So you've got 1, 2. Because if you think now, you're going to, what we're doing is we're practicing seams. So usually a seam has got 2 pieces. So if you've got some fabric there, you might want to just fold it over so that you've got
doing a hem. As if I'm doing a hem.
Well, yeah, if you were doing a hem, it would be, that would be through a single amount. But if, oh, I see what you mean. So you folded it back on itself. Where you've put the fold, I would cut it. So what have you got there? Let's have a look. So fold that in half. No, not that way, the other way. Left to right, or yeah, left over, left to right, not down, not horizontally, vertically.
Like that.
You could do it that way, but you need to have, you know where that is creased, you need to have that cut.
Wait.
So
how am I doing it? Just fold your fabric for me. What am I doing?
So left, so you want 2 pieces, really, Rachel, look at mine. You want 2 pieces of fabric that are like that, separate.
Okay, let me just cut this fabric in half.
Exactly. Just cut it in half so that you've got 2 pieces rather than it folded over.
Yeah, because I'm just going to do 2 little I'm going to do 2 little squares. I know it won't go very far, but
no, it doesn't have to be. It's only to test your seam allowances.
Yeah, so there we go. So I've got 2 pieces of fabric.
That's it. You're going to line it up underneath your machine.
Yeah, like that.
That's it. Line up against your piece of tape. That's it.
Yeah. So we go to the edge of the tape.
That's it. Foot down.
Then we go back stitches first.
Yeah, back stitch first. You're going to come backwards, couple of stitches like that, and then you're going to come forwards and you're going to just gently guide it so that it just guides up against that piece of tape.
Yeah.
Keep it nice and even as you go through. So you're almost to the end, and then you can just finish with a back stitch again.
Okay, and then
there you go. Back stitch a couple of stitches, and then you press the button to make the foot come up. If you haven't got that button, use the wheel at the side to make the needle come out of the way, and then you lift your foot up and you gently pull it off to the left. You trim it, cut the threads, and there's your seam.
Yeah.
Now,
let's have a look how I did.
let's have a look.
Shall we? So if I put it that way for you, there we go. So we can see
That looks
that's
okay.
pretty even
Yeah,
the whole way. And if you look at the
beautiful.
stitches, yeah,
Quite
nice.
even.
Yeah,
Okay. So if we look, what we would do now, so if we were making this was a seam on our garment, we'd just use a warm iron and we just press on those stitches. We use the tip of the iron just to press those stitches. And that's what's called bedding in the stitches. That would just press along there and just bed them in. We'd then open the seam up like so, and then we'd press the seam open. So we'd press the seam open like so. So
yeah.
then we would press it that way to the machine so that the seam is open.
And you can do finger pressing, can't you, as well?
You can finger press, yes. So you can finger press with this and press it open. You
Yeah.
could, and if you are using an iron to press this open, you press from this side where it's the raw side inside. You press from this side.
Yeah.
Don't press it from the neat side. If you press from this side, what would happen is where that seam is open, you'll get a little ridge appear
Yes.
either
Yeah.
side. So you just want to, with a warm iron, if you're pressing your seams open with a warm iron, you just gently press in there, press that open.
Okay.
Okay, right. So that's good. So that's what we would do if we're making most garments and patterns use 3/4 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters as their seam allowance around. I mean, even some, interior things as well. If you're making them from a pattern, they will say 1.5 centimeters to 3/4 of an inch. And then you can trim back. So you can trim that back if you need to. But what we are going to do is we're going to use that 3/4 of an inch seam allowance to now make a French seam. So why would we want what's called a French seam, which is almost like all the raw edges encased inside a little channel inside here? Now, why we would do that is something, maybe it's a sheer fabric, like a nice lightweight silk, or a sheer fabric like some Georgette, or something that's maybe a little bit more finer. Could be a cotton voile that you're making into, could be a blouse, it could be a very nice little garment that you don't want all the raw edges. So you don't want raw edges, and you don't want to then use a serger or a zigzag on the end to stop those edges all fraying away. So what we can do is we can create French seams. So a French seam, what you do, so imagine that you've got the right sides. So if I get a pen, I'm just going to mark with a pencil to tell what to just write with a letter. I'm just going to put on this. So you've got to imagine what's the right side and the wrong side of the family. I'm just going to put R for right side on there. So we've got the right sides. Now, normally when we're sewing our seams, we put the right sides together first. We put the right sides together and then we do our seam down here. And then we open up and there's the right sides with a lovely seam.
Yes.
When we create a French seam, we work the other way around. And sometimes we have to get our brain to say, right, no, to begin with, we start with the wrong sides together. So we put the wrong sides together and we're going to just start off with a 1/4 of an inch seam. So we're just going to give ourselves a 1/4 of an inch seam. So that for me was just running against my the foot of my presser foot here. So if I come down, I'm going to go down exactly the same. So I'm going to start going backwards. I'm going to come forwards and finish with a backward stitch. So you could do the same. So if you're ready to go, so with you, you've got, oh, that's nice dotty fabric. Is there a right side and a wrong side?
Yes, there is. So this is the wrong side.
Okay.
And that is the right side. You can see there is.
Yes, it is slightly darker. So you're going to put wrong sides together with the right sides facing outwards.
No, wait a minute. Wrong sides together.
Yes, wrong sides together.
Wrong sides together with the right side facing out. There you go. So that's now the right side. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Okay. Okay. So now you're going to machine down the side and you're going to do a consistent 1/4 of an inch with a back stitch to start with and finish. So you're going to start again exactly how we did that 1/4 of an inch one. You're just going to do a 1/4 of an inch.
Yeah, so it is right next to the presser foot, isn't it, again? So let me just put that there to help guide me. Okay,
That's it.
my fabrics, and I pop them. I'm just gonna. Will it be okay? They're a bit, because they're not exactly. It'll be fine. We're only doing a test. They're not exactly straight. Right. So I'm going to pop that
You're
down.
not exactly straight. You've got to be this. This is testing you. You've got to
No,
be as
look.
straight
What
as
I mean
possible.
is, look. There's, it's not. It's not. It's not perfect.
Ah, the
It'll do.
fabric.
Right.
Okay, as long as you make a nice, neat, straight seam, and then I'm going to get you to trim it back in a minute, so that will help you get that seam even straighter.
Right. So that's that. I've gone backwards.
Yeah,
I'm going to go
that's
forward.
it.
Okay,
So
off
come
we go.
forward.
And obviously I'm using a ridiculous pot here. I'm using blue. You wouldn't use blue on this, but what would you use? White or pink?
Well, that exactly. I would tend to use white,
Yeah.
on that. But it is when you've got those sort of multicolors in like the Ditsy dot that you've got there, you do have to make a decision. And I would always say, just run a piece off, just do some stitches on it, see what looks the best, which doesn't show up so much.
Right.
Okay, but get to the end and do a back stitch. That's it. So you're doing these things automatically now, you see. I'm
Okay.
really impressed.
And then we lift up the needle.
That's it. Lift up and move it to the left
Yeah.
and cut away. That's
Yeah.
it. Perfect.
Okay.
All right. So we've got a little bit of we've got an intervention now. So we got what we got to do.
Yeah.
So with that, if we needed to press it, we could press it. So you've got a nice straight seam, slightly creased fabric there, Rachel.
I know. Sorry. Apologies. Apologies.
So with a pair of scissors, I'm going to use my small scissors. You're going to cut off this. You've got a 1/4 of an inch. You're going to turn it into an 1/8 of an inch. So you're going to cut half of it away.
Half of it away.
Yeah. So you're going to neatly cut it away.
I can't
Half
do
of
it
it.
on camera. I'm going to do it off camera because I can't see what I'm doing.
Okay. So I've held it up to camera, so you can see that I'm trimming off that amount. Now, what that does, as long as you've used nice sharp scissors, it actually takes. So if you've got any sort of like loose, sort of furry, hairy bits coming off from your seam, that
We
would
don't
just
like
trim
loose,
it
furry,
right
hairy
away.
bits.
Very hairy bits.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So cut that completely off. That can come right off. That's a lot better, Rachel. Nice and neat. Well done. Okay. So now you're going to now open that up and you're going to now fold. So now you should be putting right sides should be going together. So you're going to open it up
Yes.
like that. And then you, with your fingers, or you could use an iron, you're just going to then, where it's creased over, you're just going to just give it a little press together, because what we're going to do is we're now going to sew that, and we're going to trap that little seam in a channel. We're going to just do a machine, we're going to trap that in there. So as long as you've got that, that looks pretty nice, Rachel, that's fine.
Yeah.
Put that down for 1 minute.
Yeah.
Now on your machine, if you think you've, out of that 3/4 of an inch, you've used 1/4 and you've trimmed that back, you've got, still in that seam allowance, you've got 1/2 an inch that you can create a seam with. Or if you're working on with centimeters, that's 1 centimeter seam. So again, take your measurement. So you need to measure where the needle comes through, and then you're going to move your tape to either 1/2 an inch, or you're going to move it to 1 centimeter. So I'm going to move my bit of tape so I can run it up against the side.
Well, it's
so
right. Okay. Yeah.
And then we're going to do exactly the same again. We're going to run a seam, but remember, we're going to lead, it's going to be up against that tape. We're going to start with the back stitch and then come forward, and then you're going to machine to the edge.
So that's like that. Okay.
That's it.
Yes, that feels about right. Okay, so that's like that. And then we go back. Right. And then we go forward all the way to the end, holding it as steady as we can against that tape.
and back stitch. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, foot
You got
up,
it.
away, and then that's so now is the moment of truth.
Ooh.
Have you managed to completely encase that seam inside without so it can't be seen?
Oh my Lord. Are you ready?
Show me. You've done it. Brilliant.
I've done it.
There you are. So there is a
Yay!
French seam with the all the raw rough edges caught in that channel in there.
Yeah.
And then on the outside, you've got no hairy bits
No
showing,
hair of
nothing,
it.
no loose bits coming through. It's all nice and neat and tidy.
Look at that.
Yeah. And
If
you
that,
know, traditionally, that you'll say, why is it called a French seam? I don't know why it's called a French seam, and maybe one of our viewers or someone that's watches this video later on can tell us why. I can look it up. But I think before we had the advent of overlockers and sergers to finish off the edges of garments and to construct things, this is how traditionally garments were done, so that you could lose all the raw edges in there. So is this, imagine this is next to the skin, rubbing the skin. If it
yes.
hadn't been finished off, it would just all, it would fray away. It would fray away and come away. But because
Yeah.
it's trapped, you know, the nice fine fabric, and it's trapped in that channel, it's all lovely, and it just keeps nice and,
Yeah,
you
because
know,
if you
nice
think
and
about
safe.
it, there's the English seam that we did the first seam, and that's just
Yeah.
as you say, you've got all these flappy bits, so you know it
Yes.
doesn't look very nice, and it's against the skin. And then there is your French seam, which, as you say, is now all you know, encased, so that's much nicer. It looks the same from the outside, but in there, yeah, it looks just much more professional.
Yes. There
Yeah.
you go.
Wow.
There you are, Rachel. Today's lesson. You
Ah,
again, you've got a gold star, 10 out of 10 learned today. Well done.
I tell you something. Let me go back onto the gallery. Do you know? I mean, I've done a French knot. I've done a French seam. I just wish that this was a bigger fabric because I'd now make a nice little blouse out of it or something.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything I can make that's French from that. Um,
No.
but that's, do you know? Do you know what hit me as well when I was doing that, Gary? Was it just our quote hit me that I was living in the present when I was doing that. I was really enjoying the moment and really wanting to do the best that I could do and just living it. And then when you see the results, I mean, I know if there are people watching this, they're just going to go, I learned that in secondary school or whatever. But there'll be people who won't have or will have forgotten that,
No.
just bought a sewing
No.
machine. And to be able to, you know, when you just achieve a nice, neat seam, and I've just learned some little tips along the way because I've used this machine before. I've made a bag. I've made a bag with this machine.
I remember you telling me, yes.
I did not know what I was doing, and it was a disaster. And inside the bag were all these flappy raw edges that I didn't know what to do with, and just little tips like the back stitch and things like that. I think what I did was I actually turned the fabric and went zzz, and then turned the fabric. Zzz. Can you imagine? I didn't even think about doing a back stitch. I know things sound silly, but if you don't know, you make
No.
it up,
No.
get it
No.
wrong. And so it's really good. I think for anybody who can sew, sometimes it's like learning to drive again. You pick up so many bad habits. So it's good sometimes to go back to the beginning, you know, and relearn, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, and you just hit the nail on the head. You know, I know I mean we did have sewing lessons when I was at school, but you know, I'm in my mid late 50s. But you know, then textile lessons at school came to an end. And there's
Yeah.
lots of people out there that maybe have just sort of learnt it by themselves or gone along. But you learn how to, you know, always start with a back stitch so that it's anchored. Finish with a back stitch so it's anchored, and then it's not going to necessarily come undone. You
Yeah.
know, another thing, you know, but especially me, I mean, I was, you know, I was very lucky that I had grandmothers that would sit by me and, you know, help me to learn to sew. They were very much encouraging. But, you know, we live so far away from our sort of our immediate family now. You know, where is grandmother, you know, and those to help the younger people to learn to sew. So hopefully they're using like this. They're coming on YouTube and having a look at some of the tutorials, not just we're doing, but other people are doing as well. But hopefully someone will get something from that, and even if you just make the most simplest little bag or little cushion or something from doing that seam, you know, that's a start, isn't it, really,
Yeah.
to get to learn get to learn sewing, get to learn to make some nice straight seams.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's gone all right today.
Excellent. Well, now for next week's lesson, Gary, I know we'd mentioned doing something about, learning about colour, which we can do, but do you think we could do anything sewing wise for next week's lesson? I mean,
Right.
I was going to ask you, do you think we could do a buttonhole, or are we leaping ahead way too far?
Well, we could do a buttonhole on the machine.
Yes.
So we could use the machine to do a buttonhole because it has, some of these machines have a buttonhole programmed on. So if you'd like to do, still using the machine, we could do a buttonhole on the machine. To do a hand stitch buttonhole is going to be a little bit more that we'll
Yeah.
get done in a tea
Yeah, no,
time.
let's do it on the machine. Let's do a
Okay.
buttonhole properly on the machine. Because even
Right.
if people's machines, will do buttonholes and things, they might have bad habits or whatever. And I would like to learn how to do a buttonhole. So
Yeah.
should we do a
So
buttonhole for the next one?
exactly. And I think what I'm going to write this down as we speak, because while we're talking about it, it's going to be buttons. So we're going to do buttonholes, but then we can talk about buttons and things like that. So buttonholes, buttons, etc., and fastenings
Yeah.
will be my topic for you. And we'll see how we get on. I
Yeah.
know you've got a machine that does this. There are many machines out there now that do these automatic buttonholes, so we can have a go at having a go at that. If you haven't, if there's anyone out there that actually hasn't got one of these, that does an automatic buttonhole, have a look at what we've got, because you might be thinking about upgrading your machine or something like that. So I can talk you through it and how it works. I know when I got my machine and it had these buttonholes ready to go, I was just like, wow, I've spent so much time fiddling around trying to make buttonholes and get them to be really perfect, where really I could have just changed my machine and got the machine that did it for me. So
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, fabulous. Okay, well, that will be the
Right.
next week's, which will be approximately 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 12th of August, something like that. It's the Friday anyway, 12th, 13th of August. But of course, on YouTube, it doesn't matter because it's evergreen. Somebody might find it on the 13th of January at 1 o'clock in the morning if they're a bit bored. I mean, you just never know, do you?
No, you don't.
And we'll be here forever. This will probably live on past us, Gary. I'll be 82. I will be a seamstress by then. I'll go, look at myself there, learning a French seam. And then I'll be, of course, looking at myself going, oh, and at that point I was feeling old. And now I'm 82. Look at that smooth skin, Rachel. What were you complaining about? We always do this. We always do this to ourselves. We never appreciate ourselves in the moment. We always criticize ourselves. Anyway, lovely, Gary. Thank you so much. Thank you to
You're
everybody who has
welcome.
watched today. If you have watched this for the first time, please do like and subscribe. We would love you to like or leave any comments. If you ask any questions, we will answer them for you as well. The likes and subscribes really do help us get the word out there and get us swimming in the algorithm, as they call it. If you do fancy buying us a coffee, so I don't just drink water, then do feel free to hit the button and buy us a coffee, because we are sitting here out of the joy of it, really. But if you want to buy us a coffee, it'll be lovely. Right then, gorgeous Gary, and thank you to everybody else. I shall now end this meeting and we will see you on another time.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.